At the turn of the century, most murders went unsolved. The dead took their secrets with them to the grave. It would take years before science could understand the language of the dead. But today, the forensic pathologist has the tools to interpret their language with amazing accuracy. Now, we can enter this world, a world both fascinating and forbidden. It is the world of forensic pathology, a world where the dead reveal their secrets to the living through the mysteries of the autopsy. The following film is based on the case files of medical examiners throughout the country. These are the stories behind some of their most provocative cases. Early on a cold spring morning in 1983, two fishermen spotted a strange object floating in the Mississippi River. At first, they thought it was the body of an animal caught in the undertow of the river and washed ashore. But as they got closer, they saw it had a more familiar shape. They realized that they were looking at part of a human body. Horrified at their discovery, the fishermen called police. Lieutenant Ted Carroll was the first to arrive.
I proceeded to the scene. The torso was still in the river at this point. With a boat, we got the torso over to the bank and out of the water. We placed it in a body bag and had the ambulance take it to Mercy Hospital so we could perform an autopsy on it.
The torso, which measured only 18 inches, was taken to the Davenport morgue to be autopsied. Photographs and x-rays were taken in hopes of finding other clues to the victim's identity. But the autopsy report could only give the police limited information.
They could tell us that it was a white female. She had had at least one child because she had an episiotomy scar. In the pathologist's opinion, the body had been dismembered with a chainsaw, and that was due to the cuts on the body, and part of the intestine had caught in the blade and wrapped around the torso.
We're talking about a lady's pelvis and part of a leg. That's it. The features that you would look for to identify this body and that you would normally have in an investigation are gone. You don't have hands, you don't have feet, you don't have dental records because you're missing a skull. You don't have the entire body to be able to estimate height. You're not really sure just exactly how she died. You know, we weren't sure just exactly how this lady died. We knew that she had been dismembered, but what happened before the dismemberment?
Police searched the marshlands and small islands up and down the Mississippi, hoping to find other body parts to help identify the victim.
Being familiar with the Mississippi River, I wasn't at all confident that other parts were going to show up. There have been a number of cases where nothing shows up out of that river. A human body goes in the river, it's in there very long. Fish and turtles get to it.
After days of searching the marshlands of the Mississippi, the police found nothing. And the task of identifying the torso seemed more difficult than ever.
As the news grew on what we found, we started getting reports from further and further away, inquiries as to could this be their missing lady from other jurisdictions.
The FBI computer database of missing persons indicated there were 79 women missing from the state of Iowa, and the torso could have been any one of them. To narrow the search, Lieutenant Kern and Lieutenant Carroll packed the torso in ice and drove to Oklahoma City to see Dr. Clyde Snow, a specialist in the study of bones.
When I first looked at the torso, I wanted to find out as much as I could about this individual in terms of the basic descriptors of sex, age, height, body build. There's a wealth of detail and information that we can derive from studying the bones themselves that we can't even see from x-rays.
Dr. Snow proceeded to deflesh the torso by soaking it in a concentration of hydrogen peroxide. After 10 hours, what remained were just the pelvic bones and the upper femurs. From these few bones, Dr. Snow began to build a portrait of the missing woman.
One of the best indicators of age in adults is this pubic symphysis, which is the joint that's made where the two hip bones come together in front in the pelvis. And the surface of that joint undergoes some pretty regular changes with age, and by looking at those features, we can generally estimate age within plus or minus 5 to 10 years.
Dr. Snow used the fragmented thigh bone to determine the victim's height.
Now, in this case, it was complicated by the fact that we didn't have the complete bones. We only had portions of these upper femurs, but we still have formulas that enable us to get fairly reasonable height estimates, even from fragments.
Dr. Snow, using little more than a portion of female pelvis, came up with some remarkable conclusions.
Basically, based on my examination, I could say that this person was a white female who was about 28 to 40 years of age at the time of her death. She was about 5'3", plus or minus, say 3 inches in height, around 125 to 145 pounds in weight. And those same pelvic bones showed some features that indicated that she was in an active exercise program, did a lot of sit-ups. She had been dismembered or with a saw, fairly heavy-bladed saw, and there were some indications that the person who did the dismemberment had some basic anatomical knowledge.
Of the 79 women missing in the state of Iowa, only one fit Dr. Snow's description. She was a 33-year-old housewife named Joyce Clint. At 5 feet 5 inches in height, weighing 128 pounds, she was a perfect match in age, height, and weight. She was also known to exercise strenuously and was married to one of the most prominent chiropractors in the area. After 13 years of marriage, she and her husband James had been going through a stormy divorce. Her husband said she had taken off one morning, and neither he nor their 13-year-old son had heard from her since. A week before her torso was found, Jim Clint had gone on television asking for help to find his missing wife.
Wherever she's at, it would be nice if she'd contact our son.
Okay, how do you feel about the whole thing? Has it been hard on you and your son? Or?
It's disrupted our life. In a separation or a divorce, we would have probably been able to get back to a normal life a lot quicker without this type of separation. But if she can hear this, or if she's watching, just call Bart. That's the main thing. Just let him know. Once he knows, then everybody will be happy, I'm sure.
But the police did not buy his story. There was growing evidence that James Clint was somehow involved with the murder of his wife.
Joyce, knowing the impending divorce was coming, wanted some of the things he was telling her on tape, so she hid a tape recorder. And on this tape recording, Jim threatened to cut her up in little pieces.
On March 28, 1984, 1 year after the discovery of the torso, Jim Clint was arrested for the murder of his wife. At his trial, the jury, as well as Jim Clint, listened to the tape his wife had made just a day before she had disappeared.
The only reason I was lying, why was I lying
trying
to
to
you?
kill me a few weeks ago, stuffing my head down the bed, holding my head down?
Yeah, I was trying to show you how much I didn't want you to get a lawyer.
Oh, you hurt me. You had my head down the covers and told me you were cutting me up in little pieces and I was going to die.
From the tape, the jury learned that the couple had battled over finances and the custody of their son.
Why were you doing this to me?
Because I hate you.
When Jim Clint's mistress, Terry Keene, took the stand, the jury also learned that he had promised to divorce his wife and marry her.
What did he tell you?
That Joyce wanted to try a separation.
And what did you say?
I grabbed him and hugged him, and I thought it was wonderful.
Jim Clint freely admitted to having marital problems, but said not only was he not guilty, but he insisted that the torso was not his wife. But Dr. Snow's testimony and the forensic evidence convinced the jury otherwise.
We, the jury, find the defendant, James B. Clint, guilty of the crime of murder in the second degree.
Jim Clint was stunned by the verdict. He thought he had gotten away with a perfect murder. Instead, he was facing the rest of his life in prison. Nearly 2 years after her death, Joyce's fragmented remains were finally laid to rest in Davenport's Memorial Cemetery. Even though nothing more was ever found of Joyce Clint, through forensic science, she had spoken from the grave, convicting the man who had killed her. 7 years later, Jim Clint would finally confess to the murder of his wife. Whether death occurred yesterday or 3,000 years ago, the dead's long, silent voices return to answer the questions put to them by the forensic pathologist. For him, death is not the end of the story, but just the beginning.